Hi, hello, it's me, Julian Greystoke. I'm wearing my earbuds still. Oops. Welcome to my channel where we talk all about books and writing and writerly things and stuff. And I am the most articulate YouTuber ever. Oh, I need to refresh my lipstick. Hang on. I gave my husband a smooch. It's a disaster. Crisis averted. As you can tell, we are very low-key on this channel. Today, we are talking about a subject that actually got brought up when we were reading Lightlark, which we did an in-depth, chapter-by-chapter critique of Lightlark. I call it a read-along here on this channel, so if you want to look at that, check it out. We talk about all sorts of things. But one of the things that we talked about is that I thought the chapter titles in Lightlark were pretty terrible. And that got us talking about chapter titles because I am in favor of them. I know they have fallen out of fashion, especially in adult fiction for a while now, and I want to bring them back. But while I love a good chapter title, I am not an expert on them. So I decided to poll my viewers and find out what all of us think makes a good chapter title. We will not really be discussing in this video whether or not you should use a chapter title. This video, we are just going ahead talking about what is a good one. What do we feel makes a high quality chapter title? Do I believe that every single book can benefit from chapter titles? No, there are definitely some books that are better without chapter titles. But I do wish that we saw it more because there are definitely some books that would benefit from chapter titles. In my upcoming book, Adventurer Mage, there will be chapter titles, and I'm sort of using a gimmick for this one, which is the chapter titles are all places where the characters are. Because it's an adventure story and they're traveling and moving around, I have the location where they either start out the chapter or spend the majority of the chapter as the title of the chapter, which I think is kind of fun. It gives you a little bit of idea of where they are in the world, gets you placed in space a little bit right away, but other people might disagree, other people might hate that idea. Before we go to my YouTube and see what my viewers had to say about chapter titles, what do I feel makes a good chapter title for me? I personally do not like the trend that I've been seeing in both Jenna Moressi's book and also in Lightlark of just the name of an object that is somewhere within the chapter, like the and noun is the chapter title. In Lightlark, it might be like the key. In the Savior series, it's probably something like the challenge. Like, for me, that's a no. That's really boring, and I really wish that we could get more creative with it. As much as I am using a sort of gimmick for my chapters in my most recent books, I personally prefer that you don't stick, I know I'm going against my own preference, but I normally prefer that you don't stick to some sort of like gimmickal rule and kind of just name your chapters what feels right for the chapter. And sometimes that might be the noun, or sometimes it could be something way different. One thing that I personally hate as a chapter title is quotes from already existing books. I don't even love it when it's quotes from books that exist within the fantasy world, but I hate it even more if it is quotes from, like, if it's a fantasy book and you're putting quotes in it from our world, or even if it's not a fantasy book and you are using quotes, it feels like a cheap gimmick to me of you trying to be like, look how I've woven in these famous quotes and kind of put that idea of like a higher quality book into your reader's head. I don't know if that's true, but it makes me feel manipulated and like you're a little bit too big for your britches. So for me, those are my least favorite types of chapter titles. So let's look at some of what my viewers have said about chapter titles. I don't know if I'll get to everybody, but I'm gonna have a look-see. I also have some on Twitter, so we're gonna do our best to try and see what everybody has to say. Because unfortunately for us writers, chapter titles are often a matter of taste, and so you're probably never gonna be able to please everybody, but let's see if we can find any trends. This person says, I love a fun chapter title. For me, the ideal chapter title should describe what happens, but in an interesting / funny / mysterious way. My favorite chapter title of all time is Grover Unexpectedly Loses His Pants from The Lightning Thief. Basically every chapter in that book is pure gold. And I'm very fond of the chapter titles in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Of Herbs and Stewed Rabbit is one of my favorites of those books. Definitely agree. If you can find that magical place where you can get a chapter title that like pertains to the chapter but in an intriguing way that makes me as the reader go, oh, I want to know about that, then you've definitely got us. Here's a different angle though. For multi-POV, I always appreciate chapter titles with the name of the character. They're not clever, quirky, or fun, but they sure are nifty. And sometimes, yeah, chapter titles can be utilitarian. I'm 100% in favor of clarifying who is going to be the viewpoint character in the next section with a good chapter title. But you can get a way around that if you are writing multi-POV and you don't want to do that. Just make it very clear in your first line, your first paragraph of every chapter, whose POV we are in. So have that character do, say, or think something first, and it'll make it fairly clear like who we're with. We have another Lord of the Rings one. There's quite a few that reference Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and their chapter titles, so I'm definitely gonna have to go back through that myself and look back through The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings at their chapter titles specifically. This person says, this is a very taste-specific thing, but I yearn for chapter titles that are funky, a la A Shortcut to Mushrooms from The Lord of the Rings, or The Loosing of the Shadow from Wizard of Earthsea. It's hard to describe what I mean exactly, but those are the types of chapter titles that make me want to bring back chapter titles the most. A trend that we're gonna see in this is titles like that don't just say the blank, but like give you a little taste, but you don't quite understand the taste that you've been given, so you want to find out more. This person says either something crazy that makes me go, wait, I have to read that, as we just talked about. Pretty much all Rick Riordan chapter titles. So he's the person who wrote like the Lightning Thief and the Percy Jackson series and all those series. I read like all of the Lightning Thief series, but then I kind of got bored of his style. It's a little bit young for me. But they give some sample titles such as I play dodgeball with cannibals. We get advice from a poodle. I learn how to grow zombies. This person also says, I enjoy chapter titles with double meanings or a play on words, such as dual education. Dual spelled like want a duel, but referencing dual meaning double. That's a cool little one, like a little tricksy. And they do say, hey, for adventure style books with lots of traveling, titles can be used for direction, location. Going farther south, name of the city or town. Hey, hello, look, what's what I'm doing in Adventurer Mage. Or if this is a time-sensitive story, chapter titles could be a definitive countdown, which is also something I really like the idea for. Yet another person recommends the Rick Riordan chapters, so I think those chapters really left an impression on people. But they also say, I love a chapter title that helps set the scene but not in an obvious way. If the chapter takes place on a ship, rather than naming it The Ship, which is what Jenna Moreci or the author of Lightlark would do, maybe they name it Kithra's Caller, and throughout the events of the chapter, the reader learns that Kithra's Caller is the name of the ship they are on. Stuff like that. Thematic, but not beating you over the head with it. I think that really nails what I'm getting at with some of the chapter titles that I didn't like in the books that we've read recently. They're thematic, but like, you all know that I hate to feel like an author is treating me like I'm stupid, and some of those chapter titles really make me feel like that. This person says, I always find it interesting when all chapter titles are centered around a theme and are plot specific at the same time. Imagine how cool it would be if the major arcana titles and Handbook for Mortals actually meant something to the plot. Oh yes, I may or may not be considering doing this for the published version of Second Floor, my novella, if I ever get around to it, because it doesn't actually have chapter titles right now, but tarot factors into the story a little bit, and I think now that I have been practicing tarot reading and gaining more knowledge of tarot, I think I could really do interesting things, like really hint at it, especially if the reader knows anything about tarot. Interesting for somebody who doesn't know tarot, but for people who do, they'd be like, oh. This person says, dealing with dragons. I don't know if they're technically titles or subtitles, but I love books that have in which thing happens. This person does point out correctly that it's mostly middle grade and some young adult that does that, and is also a little bit old-fashioned, but I agree that it should come back and adult books should give it a try too. And yes, it is in Dealing with Dragons, the chapter gimmick, I guess you could call it, is that in which insert thing, in which Cimmerian has to bake a cake or something. I don't know. I could probably find the book, but I'm lazy, so. This person disagrees with me, and that's okay. That's allowed, because chapter titles are very taste-based. This person says, of all the things I didn't like about Lightlark, I think that chapter titles are good and that they accomplish the whole point of chapter titles. We're gonna have to disagree there, friend. Open the book at a random chapter, read the title, and I usually know what happens in that chapter without reading anything else. Ugh. I don't think that's because the chapter titles are good. I think that's because the rest of the book is bad. For example, I know that in the chapter Blood is when she has to eat a bite of human heart in front of everybody. Well, I disagree. Like I said, this is so subjective. So like, while I think that those sort of boring, bland chapter titles are just that boring and bland, I can see how you might find them useful, especially if you're rereading or you want to reread a certain section. It's easy to go, oh, these chapter titles are so straightforward that I can easily find the section that I want to read again. This person says, personally, I like basic chapters that summarize what the chapter is about. Off the top of my head, Abby Emmons, who is an author tuber who I have not heard of, but I might have to check them out, did this pretty well in her book 100 Days of Sunlight. I have not read it, so I can't speak to the chapter title quality in my opinion. This person says that chapters named after characters are on the bottom, and I kind of agree. Two people now are disagreeing with the person further up who said that chapter titles of the POV are the way to go. I agree and I disagree. Like, I don't mind the chapter titles as the POV, but also it can feel pretty bland and boring, and it would be nice to have, like, you could maybe do the POV and the chapter title. This person says, in my detective novel, Dead Man Walking, I use titles that start with the, so like Jenna Moreci does. For example, The Woman, The Morgue, The Vision, The Cold. Again, not to my taste, but maybe it works better in a detective novel. In Supernatural Pizza, I use chapter titles that give an idea of what the chapter is about, like Tish's Last Day, Opening Day, Reading Reviews, and Protests. This person says, I really enjoy titles that don't mean what you think they'll mean at the start of the chapter, but reveal a more layered meaning by the end of the chapter. 100%. It's rare. It is super rare, and I imagine it's super hard to do. Most modern books I read don't bother with chapter titles, so nothing comes to mind outside of the middle grade, but I can instantly recall times when a TV series played with titles. Apologies for the non-book related things. I think this is perfectly viable to go off on this angle. Breaking Bad Season 2 had titles carefully crafted to make sense by putting them together to reveal a major event at the end of the season like a secret code. Ooh, I love that. The Leftovers had an episode titled International Assassin, which made absolutely no sense until you watch the episode and then it becomes hilarious. I love that, and maybe we should be studying more shows that have like names for their episodes. I think shows have leaned away from doing that too, and I also miss that. I think we should bring that back as well. And I do like this idea of the episode titles that only make sense like once you are in it. And I think that could be really useful for chapter titles. I think of Friends and their chapter title naming technique, which is sort of an in which kind of style, so it's the one with the, and I think that could be really interesting to use. It wouldn't suit every book, certainly, but for the right book, it could be really cool. This person says, one of my favorite chapters in the book Twilight is blood type. If chapters are going to be titled, I like them to be a bit cryptic and make you wonder what they might mean until you read and realize how it connects. This person recommends the chapter titles in Howl's Moving Castle, such as In Which Sophie Talks to Hats, In Which Sophie Becomes Howl's Old Mother. Love it. It's been a long time since I read Howl's Moving Castle. This person recommends the chapter titles in The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels, which is an amazing name for a book. This person says, I find ones that hint at what the chapter is about to be most helpful, especially if I put the book down and need help figuring out where I left off. Ooh, that's a different angle too. Like, maybe you have to stop reading mid-chapter if you put the book down, but you pick it back up, you could look at the chapter title to kind of get you back into the zone of what you were reading. So that's the way I think that chapter titles might actually be like helpful and not just like cosmetic or cool. Around the World in 80 Days had very memorable chapter titles. I've actually not read that one, so I'll have to take your word for it. This is interesting. This person says that in their current project, which is a fantasy webcomic, their examples of chapter titles are something like POV, you're in the school library and you find a collection of short stories about knights, witches, and beasts. And that could be a really interesting angle, especially if you're writing like something more contemporary and poppy feeling, like maybe even a Portal fantasy, where a character would use like more modern phrasing like POV, and that would mean something to younger readers. Again, this probably wouldn't work for an adult book, but like for a young adult or middle grade book, actually I kind of like that idea. This person says, I also hate titles that are too long or have inspirational quotes. Agree with you there. I do not like the quotes ones. This person says, easy answer, nothing too spoilery, Tom murders Jerry, yet understandable in hindsight, cat and mouse. Maybe metaphorical, but don't make it too pretentious. Tired of overanalyzing answer. New character, new location, new whatever. What it says on the tin. Treebeard, you meet Treebeard. Helm's Deep, There is a battle there. Tired in general answer. Numbers, you can't mess up. I mean, you can if you're real bad at numbers. Evil answer given as a helpful tip to someone. Literally, whenever season 1 of Attack on Titan is going on with the episode names, do that. I don't really understand the reference, but okay. And finally, guilty pleasure answer, stupid puns. I'm neither in favor of nor against stupid puns as chapter titles. And this person says, I've only ever enjoyed comedic or laconic chapter titles, flowery attempts at poetry and melodrama I don't like. All right, that's it for YouTube. Let's hop over to Twitter and look at what the replies are real quick. Not as many answers from Twitter, so we'll get through this pretty quickly. This person says, one thing I hate, chapter titles that give away the plot or spoil the chapter. For example, if someone dies at the end of the chapter, I don't want a title like Losing Frank or Frank's death. Yeah, there's a fine line to walk, and it can be pretty difficult between giving hints about the chapter and straight up spoiling the chapter. And this person says, I like the intriguing ones when they don't reveal what's inside the chapter or they subvert your expectations but make total sense once you read it. And I had one person respond to me with an entire doc about chapter titles, which I would recommend that they go ahead and take and turn into something for themselves, because I believe that they either have a YouTube channel or are thinking of having a YouTube channel or possibly just a blog. But anyway, you know who you are. Nobody else sent me that. You know who you are. So I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's yours and I want you to take credit for it in your own way, but let me look at a few of the things that you said. So some of your preferences in chapter titles are chapter titles that intrigue, raise questions in your mind, offer a hint or reference to something happening in somebody's story, combine to reveal the progression of the story. We kind of talked about that with the episode titles, like making sense and telling you something when it's all said and done, and variation between chapter titles. So that's interesting. This person, similarly to me, likes their chapter titles to not necessarily be all the same. They also say that they don't like chapter titles when they feel forced, like the author felt obligated to make chapter titles, but didn't actually want to, or it's not supported by the book. And I agree, like we talked about at the beginning, not every single book is going to benefit from chapter titles. So if you feel like you're forcing it, then maybe your book isn't meant to have chapter titles. They point out this kind of cool chapter gimmick with like segmented or thematic, increasingly personal. So chapter 1, the heart. Chapter 2, skin. Chapter 3, bones. Chapter 4, blood. Chapter 5, the heart again. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave it there. It's a lengthy doc, and I don't want it to go to waste. So if you are watching this, creator of this, you know who you are. Please, turn it into a blog or a vlog, and then, let me know, and I'll link it for everybody to find, because there's a lot here, and too much for us to get through in this video. This last person recommends the chapter titles in Blood Meridian, that is hard to say, which seems to have chapter titles that are, once again, pretty practical and kind of tell you a little bit what to expect without being too bland. And this person also seconds the idea of chapter titles as being useful for finding a scene again or a moment again that you're looking for if you're looking back through. They specifically mention a play called Our Country's Good, which actually has titles for all of the scenes, and they're fairly straightforward titles for the scenes, and so it's easier to go back through and look, especially in a play, if it's something you're like, I need Act 1, Scene 3, what's that about? You can find it by what it's about instead of looking for the number. And I could see how that could be really useful in books as well. So that's it for my chapter titles video. I hope that you all enjoyed it. If you want to check out how I did with chapter titles, I have them in The Wolf and the Hawk. Boots does not have traditional chapters. It has very large sections that are all by POV. So that one don't look at for chapter title suggestions because there aren't really chapters. Because you can do anything with your book. It's your book. You can do anything with it. Don't want chapters? Don't have chapters. Want a lot of chapters? Have a lot of chapters. Want chapter titles? Have chapter titles. Don't be afraid to go against the trends. You're writing an adult book and you really want to put chapter titles in it? Heckin' do it!
Don't let your dreams be dreams.
Or if you're writing a young adult fantasy and you really just hate having to put chapter titles in it and you're forcing it, Don't do it then. Don't forget that you can also support me over on Patreon, where you get bonus content never seen here on the main channel, or other rewards that you can get at various levels, so go check it out if that interests you. And if you don't want the hassle of Patreon, I also have a Ko-fi, whatever it is, so if you want to just like leave me a little tip, you can do that, or you can do that through YouTube. I have lots of options for you if you want to like give me a little tip here on the channel. But otherwise, I will see all of you again next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye!
Popular. You're gonna be popular.
Popular like my patrons: Julius the Nice Dragon, Haley, Sam, Kira, Kihokaro, Mooney, Maria, Harley, Kirsten, Bear, Jojo Bookish, Lauren, Robin, Ursula, Caitlin, Jessica, KJ, LaFone, Amanda, Unicorn Jenny, Celia, Neon, Alyssa, Rita, Deborah, Afra, Melissa, Swamp Goblin Waifu, Sophia, Merween, Kit, Hidden Glade, Light Julie, Belle, Patrick, Anne Sophie, Callison, Ray, Shelby, Zaire, Jesper, Rennie, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, Amanda, Lisa, and Sarah. Whew, that's a lot of really awesome patrons, and boy, are they popular.